The ferry bell woke Kendra Pritchett before dawn, which meant someone on the east bank needed crossing badly enough to ring for service in the dark. She set down the plane she had been testing on a scrap of pine, brushed the sawdust from her leather apron, and walked to the landing where the big flat-bottomed ferry waited in its slip. The river ran wide here, dark as hammered tin in the pre-dawn light, and on the far bank 3 horses stamped and blew steam into the cold air. Their riders were shadowed shapes, but one of them rang the bell again, sharp and impatient. "I will get it," she called toward the shed where Jakob Jensen kept his tools and a cot for nights when he worked late. No answer came, but she had not expected one. Jakob spoke less in a week than most men managed in an afternoon. She loosened the mooring rope and poled the ferry out into the current, leaning into the long pole the way he had taught her when she first came to the boatyard 8 months ago, following the river road with nothing but her toolbox and the clothes she wore. The crossing took 10 minutes of steady work. The current wanted to push her downstream, but she knew the river's moods now, knew where to angle the ferry and where to let the water do the labor. By the time she bumped against the far landing, the sky had gone from black to deep blue, and she could see the riders clearly. Her hands went numb on the pole. The man in the center sat a gray mare with the easy posture of someone who had been riding since childhood. He wore good wool, forest green with leather trim, and his hair was the color of old copper, tied back with a cord. His face was narrow and handsome in a sharp-edged way, all angles and intensity. She had not seen him in 3 years, but she would have known Drayton Morwick anywhere. The 2 men flanking him were broad-shouldered and watchful, hired guards by the look of them. Drayton dismounted and led his mare onto the ferry, and the guards followed. None of them spoke. Kendra kept her eyes on the deck and shoved off, her heart beating hard enough that she wondered if they could hear it. Halfway across, Drayton said, "Hello, Kendra." His voice was the same, smooth and certain. She had once thought it beautiful. "Mr. Morwick," she said, not looking up. 3 years on the run and you end up poling a ferry." There was no anger in his tone, only a kind of weary satisfaction. "I hired trackers, you know, spent good coin. They lost you at the border crossings every time, but I should have known to check the river trade." "Your father was a boat builder before the clan took him." "He built fishing boats," Kendra said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Small craft, not like these." She nodded toward the boatyard taking shape on the west bank, where the keel she had been planing that morning lay across 2 sawhorses beside the skeletal ribs of a cargo barge. "You always did have the gift for it," Drayton said. "Better hands than your father, if I am honest." "That is why your uncle agreed to the match. A boat builder in the family, a connection to the Morwick timber rights. It was a good arrangement. My uncle had no right to make it. He had every right. He was your kin and your guardian after your father died. The bride price was paid in full, witnessed and recorded. You were contracted to me, Kendra. You still are." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper, the wax seal dark red against the cream parchment. "I have the documents." The ferry bumped against the west landing. Kendra tied off and lowered the ramp, and the guards led their horses onto solid ground. Drayton followed, but he did not mount. He stood on the bank, the document in his hand, and looked past her toward the boatyard. Jakob was standing in the doorway of the work shed, a hammer hanging loose in his right hand. He was a big man, not tall but solid through the chest and shoulders, with the kind of strength that came from years of splitting logs and hauling timber. His hair was dark blonde going gray, his face weathered and still, his eyes the pale blue of winter sky. He wore canvas trousers and a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he looked at Drayton the way he might look at a tree he was deciding whether to fell. "Who is this?" Drayton asked. Jakob Jensen, Kendra said. He owns the boatyard, and you work for him. We are partners. Drayton's mouth thinned. Partners. In the business, Kendra said quickly. He took me on when I needed work. I do the finish carpentry and he handles the heavy framing. We split the profits. How progressive. Drayton folded the document and tucked it back into his coat. It does not matter. You will need to settle your affairs here. I came to bring you home. Jakob walked down to the landing, his boots loud on the planks. He stopped beside Kendra, not touching her, not speaking, just standing there like a wall. Up close, she could see the scars on his hands, the calluses, the burn mark on his left forearm from a forge accident 2 months back that he had never bothered to explain. She has a home, Jakob said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel underfoot. Drayton looked at him for the first time, really looked, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear, but a recalibration. You are the ferryman, he said. I heard about you in the village. They say you fought in the northern campaigns. They say a lot of things. They say you killed 16 men at the Ridge of Sorrows. Jakob said nothing. Well, Drayton said, I am not here for a fight. I am here to collect what is mine by law. Kendra Pritchett was contracted to me when she was 15 years old. The bride price was 200 silver marks, paid to her uncle Fenimore Pritchett in the presence of witnesses. She is now 18, of marriageable age, and I have come to claim her as my wife. If you have a dispute with that, take it to a magistrate, but she is leaving with me today. No, Jakob said, the word hung in the air, flat and absolute. Drayton stared at him. Excuse me, she is not leaving. You have no authority to keep her. I have every authority. She is my business partner and she has done nothing wrong. She broke a contract. She was a child when that contract was made. She never agreed to it. The law does not require her agreement. Her guardian agreed on her behalf and the price was paid. That makes it binding. Drayton pulled out the document again and unfolded it, holding it up so they could see the signatures, the seals, the careful script. This is legal and proper. If you interfere, you are the one breaking the law. Kendra's throat felt tight. She had known this moment might come, had dreaded it for 3 years, but she had hoped distance and time would be enough. She had been a fool. Drayton was not a man who let go of things, especially things he believed he owned. Jakob took the document from Drayton's hand, not roughly but with the same calm finality he brought to everything. He unfolded it, read it slowly, his lips moving slightly as he worked through the formal language. Then he folded it again and handed it back. This says her uncle signed for her, Jakob said, but it does not say she agreed. She did not need to agree. Maybe not then, but she is 18 now, old enough to speak for herself. Jakob looked at Kendra, his pale eyes steady. Do you want to go with him? No, Kendra said. The word came out stronger than she had expected. I do not want to marry him. I never did. Drayton's jaw tightened. What you want is irrelevant. The contract is valid. Then we will challenge it, Jakob said. On what grounds? On the grounds that it was made without her consent and against her will. On the grounds that she was underage and had no guardian with her best interests at heart. On the grounds that she has built a life here and has no obligation to go back to a man she does not want. Drayton laughed, short and sharp. You think any magistrate will care about that? She is an orc, Jensen. Her word against a written contract signed by a human guardian and witnessed by human men. You know how that will go. I know how it should go, Jakob said. Should and will are different things. Drayton stepped closer, his voice dropping. I am trying to be reasonable here. I could have brought a dozen men. I could have taken her by force. But I came in good faith with the law on my side to do this properly. Do not make me regret that. You are threatening me. I am warning you. If you keep her from me, I will go to the magistrate, and I will have her returned to me by order of the court. And when that happens, I will make sure everyone knows that you harbored a runaway bride, interfered with a legal contract, and tried to cheat an honest man out of what he paid for. Your reputation on this river will be finished." Jakob was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Get off my landing." Drayton's face went hard. "You are making a mistake. Get off my landing or I will throw you off." One of the guards shifted, his hand going to the sword at his belt, but Drayton raised a hand to stop him. "We are leaving," he said, "but I will be back, and next time I will have the law with me." He mounted his horse and the guards followed suit. They rode up the path toward the village, hooves clattering on the stone, and disappeared into the trees. Kendra realized she was shaking. She sat down hard on the edge of the landing, her legs suddenly weak. Jakob stood beside her, still holding the hammer, his face unreadable. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have told you." "Told me what? About the contract, about Drayton, about why I left?" Jakob was quiet. Then he set the hammer down and sat beside her, his weight making the planks creak. "You do not owe me your whole history," he said. "People come to the river to start over, I know that better than most. But he is going to come back. He is going to bring the magistrate, and you heard what he said. The contract is legal. I do not have a defense. Then we will make one." "How?" Jakob looked out at the river, at the far bank where the sun was just starting to break over the trees, turning the water to gold. "There is a thing called a river moot," he said. "Old law from before the magistrates. When there is a dispute between people who live and work on the water, they can call a gathering of rivermen to settle it. The decision is binding, same as a court ruling, but the rules are different. Fairer, sometimes. You think they would hear my case? I think they would hear the truth. And if the truth is that your uncle forged your consent, or took a bribe without your knowledge, or acted against your interests, then the contract is void. But we will need proof. I do not have proof. I was not even there when he made the agreement. I only found out about it a week before Drayton came to collect me. Then we will find it." Jakob stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. His hand was rough and warm, and he held on for a second longer than necessary before letting go. "First, we work. The barge keel needs planing and the ribs need steaming. We have a launch in 3 weeks and we are behind schedule. Then tonight we start asking questions." Kendra nodded. Her heart was still racing, but the panic had started to fade. Jakob had that effect. He made things feel possible, even when they were not. They worked through the morning in the comfortable silence that had become their routine. Kendra planed the keel until it was smooth as glass, checking the line with her eye and her hands, feeling for the slightest deviation. Jakob steamed the ribs in a long trough filled with boiling water, bending them over forms until they curved like the bones of some great beast. The work was meditative, repetitive, the kind of labor that let the mind wander. She had come to the boatyard in the dead of winter, half frozen and desperate. She had spent 2 years moving from town to town, taking work where she could find it, always looking over her shoulder. She had worked in kitchens, in stables, in a tannery that left her smelling like death for a month. Then she had heard about a ferryman on the border river who needed a carpenter, and she had walked 3 days through the snow to get here. Jakob had looked at her toolbox, asked her to plane a board, and hired her on the spot. He had not asked where she came from or why she was alone. He had given her a corner of the work shed to sleep in, a share of the profits, and a chance to do the work she loved. In return, she had given him her skill, her labor, and a quiet, growing affection she was afraid to name. They ate lunch on the landing, bread and cheese and apples from the village market. Jakob brewed coffee in a battered pot over a small fire, strong and bitter the way she had learned to like it. He handed her a cup and sat beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. "Do you want to talk about him?" Jakob asked. Kendra shook her head. Then, after a moment, she said, "He is not cruel. That is the worst part. If he were cruel, it would be easier to hate him. But you do not want to marry him." "No, I do not love him. I do not even know him, not really. We met twice before the contract was signed. He came to my uncle's house to look at the boats my father had built, and he saw me working on a skiff. He asked my uncle if I was spoken for, and my uncle said no. A week later, Drayton came back with a bride price and a contract. My uncle signed it without asking me. Why? Because Drayton owns timber rights on the eastern hills. Good wood, oak and ash, the kind boat builders need. My uncle thought it was a smart match, a way to secure the family business." She laughed bitter. "He did not care that I was 15. He did not care that I had never agreed. He just saw an opportunity and took it. Where is your uncle now?" "I do not know. I left before I could find out. I heard he sold my father's workshop a year after I ran, took the money and moved south." Jakob was quiet, sipping his coffee. Then he said, "If he signed your name without your consent, that is fraud. The contract is not valid. How do we prove it? We find witnesses. People who knew you, who knew your uncle, who can testify that you never agreed. We find the original contract and compare the signature. We build a case." He looked at her, his eyes serious. "But it will not be easy. Drayton is right about one thing. You are an orc and he is a human with money and connections. The river moot will be fairer than a magistrate's court, but it is still not a sure thing." "Why are you doing this?" Kendra asked. The question had been building in her all morning, a weight in her chest. "You could just let me go. It would be easier for you. Safer." Jakob set down his cup. He looked at the river, at the trees, at the half-built barge. "When I came back from the war," he said, "I did not talk for a year. Not a word. I worked, I ate, I slept, but I did not speak. People thought I was broken. Maybe I was. Then one day I was hauling timber and a log rolled off the cart and pinned a boy's leg. Everyone was shouting, panicking, and I just walked over and lifted the log off him. No effort, no thought. Just did it. And the boy's mother looked at me and said, 'Thank you.' And I realized I could still do that. I could still step between someone and the thing that was going to hurt them. That is all I know how to do anymore." He looked at her then, and his expression was open in a way she had never seen before, vulnerable and raw. "You came here with nothing, and you worked harder than anyone I have ever seen. You have a gift, Kendra. You build things that are beautiful and strong, and you do it with your hands and your mind and your heart. I am not going to let someone take that away from you, not because of a piece of paper, not because of a contract you never signed, not if I can stop it." Kendra felt her throat tighten. She set down her cup and looked at her hands, rough and scarred from work, the nails broken, the knuckles swollen. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything, just keep working, finish the barge. Let me handle the rest." That night, after the sun had set and the work was done, Jakob rode to the village and came back with a name. Martin Wells, a clerk who had worked for Kendra's uncle 5 years ago, now living in a town 2 days upriver. Jakob said Martin had a reputation for honesty, and if anyone remembered the details of the contract, it would be him. "I will go," Kendra said. "We will both go," Jakob said. "I am not letting you travel alone, not with Drayton looking for you." They left at dawn, taking Jakob's small fishing boat upriver. The current fought them, but Jakob rowed with the steady, tireless rhythm of someone who had spent his life on the water. Kendra sat in the bow, watching the bank slide past, the forest thick and green on either side. Birds called from the trees, and the air smelled like pine and river mud. They did not talk much. Jakob was not a man for idle conversation, and Kendra had learned to be comfortable with the silence. But there was a new tension between them now, a current of something unspoken that made her hyper-aware of his presence. She watched the way his shoulders moved as he rowed, the way his hands gripped the oars, the way his jaw tightened when the current pushed back. They reached the town by midday and found Martin Wells in a small office above a grain merchant's shop. He was a thin, nervous man with ink-stained fingers and a habit of adjusting his spectacles every few seconds. When Jakob explained why they had come, Martin went pale. "I remember," he said. "I remember that contract. Your uncle brought it to me to witness, but I refused." Kendra's heart leaped. "Why?" "Because you were not there. I told him I would not witness a contract without both parties present, especially a marriage contract involving a minor. He got angry, called me self-righteous, said I was making trouble over nothing. He took the contract and left. I assumed he found someone else to witness it." "Do you remember what the signature looked like?" Jakob asked. Martin frowned, thinking. "I did not see him sign it. But I saw the document itself. It was already filled out when he brought it to me. The signature was neat, careful. Too neat, I thought at the time. Your handwriting was never that careful, was it, Kendra?" "No," Kendra said. Her hands had always been better at shaping wood than shaping letters. Her writing was functional at best, clumsy and uneven. "Then he forged it," Jakob said. "Most likely," Martin agreed. "But I cannot prove that. I never saw him do it." "You can testify that she was not present when the contract was made. You can testify that you refused to witness it because of that. That is enough." Martin looked uncertain. "Testify where?" "At a river moot. We are calling one to challenge the contract." "A river moot?" Martin shook his head. "I have not heard of one of those in years. They are still legal, still binding, and still dangerous if you are going up against someone with money and influence." Martin looked at Kendra. "Drayton Morwick is not a man to cross lightly. He has friends, connections. If you challenge him and lose, he will make your life hell." "If I do not challenge him, I will spend my life married to a man I do not love," Kendra said. "That is already hell." Martin sighed. "All right, I will testify, but you need more than just me. You need the original contract, and you need someone who can prove the signature is a forgery." "Where would the original contract be?" Jakob asked. "If it was recorded properly, it would be in the regional archive. But if your uncle wanted to hide something, he might have kept it private. Either way, you need to find it." They thanked Martin and left. On the way back downriver, Kendra felt a small spark of hope. It was not much, but it was more than she'd had that morning. "We need to find my uncle," she said. Jakob nodded. "I will send word to some people I know. Rivermen talk. If he is still in the trade, someone will know where he is." It took a week. A week of waiting, of working on the barge, of watching the road for Drayton's return. Kendra planed and sanded and fitted the ribs, losing herself in the work, trying not to think about what would happen if they failed. Jakob was a steady presence beside her, always there, always watching, always ready. The word came back on a cold, clear morning. Fenimore Pritchett was living in a river town 3 days south, working as a broker for a timber merchant. Jakob did not hesitate. He packed a bag, checked the edge on his belt knife, and told Kendra to lock the workshop while he was gone. "I am coming with you," she said. "No, he is my uncle. This is my fight. And if Drayton comes while we are both gone, he will take everything we have built. Someone needs to stay here, and it needs to be you. You are the one who knows how to finish the barge. You are the one who knows how to deal with men like my uncle." Jakob looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I will be back in 5 days. If I am not, take the ferry and go north. There is a woman named Ingrid Halson in the border town of Crossing. She owes me a favor. She will keep you safe." "Jakob, promise me." Kendra promised, though she hated it. She watched him row downriver until he was out of sight, then went back to the workshop and threw herself into the work. The barge was nearly finished, the hull planked and sealed, the deck framed. She worked from dawn to dusk, and then into the night by lantern light, fitting the deck boards, caulking the seams, carving the tiller. 3 days passed. Then 4. On the 5th day, Drayton returned. He came alone this time, riding a black gelding, no guards, no documents. He tied his horse to a post and walked down to the landing where Kendra was sanding the tiller. She stood, her heart pounding, and faced him. "Where is your ferryman?" Drayton asked. "Away on business. Convenient." Drayton looked at the barge, at the workshop, at the tools laid out in careful order. "You have done well here, better than I expected. This is good work, Kendra. Your father would be proud. What do you want? I want to make you an offer." He stepped onto the landing, his hands open, his posture relaxed. "I have been thinking about what your ferryman said, about consent, about choice, and I realized something. I do not want a wife who hates me. I do not want a marriage built on resentment and obligation. That is no life for either of us." Kendra said nothing, waiting. "So here is my offer," Drayton continued. "Come back with me, not as my wife, but as my business partner. You have the skills I need. You understand boats, wood, craftsmanship. I own the timber rights, and you have the talent to turn that timber into something valuable. We can build a workshop together, a real one, better than this." He gestured at the shed, dismissive. "You will have your own space, your own tools, full profits. And if over time you decide you want more than a business arrangement, then we can revisit the marriage, but only if you want it." It was a good offer, a generous offer, more than she had expected, and that was what made her suspicious. "Why?" she asked. "Because I am a practical man. I want the best boat builder I can find, and that is you. The marriage contract was my father's idea, not mine. He thought it would secure the family's interests, tie us to your uncle's connections. But your uncle is a drunk and a cheat, and his connections are worthless. You, on the other hand, are worth investing in. And if I say no," Drayton's expression hardened, "then I go to the magistrate and I enforce the contract. You will be dragged back in chains if necessary, and your ferryman will be charged with harboring a fugitive bride. He will lose this boatyard, his livelihood, possibly his freedom. Is that what you want? You are threatening him. I am giving you a choice. Come willingly as my partner and we both get what we want. Refuse and I will take you anyway, and everyone you care about will suffer for it." Kendra's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to hit him, to shove him into the river, to scream, but she knew it would not help. Drayton held all the power here, and he knew it. "I need time to think," she said. "You have until sunset. After that I am going to the magistrate." He mounted his horse and rode back up the path, leaving her alone on the landing. Kendra sat down hard, her mind racing. The offer was a trap. She could see that clearly. Drayton did not want a partner. He wanted control. He wanted her skills, her labor, and the timber rights that came with her. And if she went with him, she would spend the rest of her life under his thumb, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, always wondering when he would decide the business arrangement was not enough and invoke the marriage contract after all. But if she refused, Jakob would suffer. The man who had given her a home, a livelihood, a chance to be herself. The man who had stood between her and Drayton and said no. She was still sitting there, paralyzed by the choice, when she heard the sound of oars on the water. Jakob was rowing upriver, his face grim, his shoulders tight. Beside him in the boat sat a man Kendra recognized immediately, even though she had not seen him in 3 years. Kendra Pritchett was thinner than she remembered, his face gaunt, his clothes worn. He looked like a man who had spent those 3 years running from something. Jakob beached the boat and climbed out, offering a hand to Kendra. The older man took it and stumbled onto the landing, his eyes darting to Kendra and then away, ashamed. "Hello, Kendra," Fenimore said. She did not answer. Jakob set a canvas bag on the planks and opened it. Inside were papers, dozens of them, contracts and receipts and letters. He pulled out a single document, unfolded it, and held it up. "The original marriage contract," Jakob said. "Your uncle kept it. He was using it to blackmail Drayton." Kendra stared at her uncle. "What?" Fenimore would not meet her eyes. "Drayton's father was the one who arranged the marriage," he said. "He wanted the timber rights, but he also wanted to make sure his son did not marry some tavern girl he was seeing at the time. So he paid me extra to backdate the contract, to make it look like it was signed a year earlier than it actually was. That way, when Drayton's father died, the contract would already be in place, and Drayton could not get out of it without losing face. But Drayton did not know about the backdate. He thought the contract was legitimate, so when I fell on hard times I started asking him for money. Little amounts at first, then more. I told him if he did not pay, I would reveal the fraud and his family's reputation would be ruined." "You blackmailed him," Kendra said, her voice flat. "I needed the money, I had debts. You sold me to pay your debts. I thought you would be happy. Drayton is rich, connected. You would have had a good life. I would have had a life I did not choose." Fenimore finally looked at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "I am sorry, Kendra. I know that does not mean anything now, but I am sorry. I was desperate, and I made a terrible mistake." Jakob handed Kendra the contract. She looked at it, at the signatures, at the dates. The signature next to her name was neat and careful, nothing like her actual handwriting. And the date was wrong, off by more than a year. "This proves it," she said. "It proves your uncle forged your signature and committed fraud," Jakob said. "But it also proves Drayton did not know. He thought the contract was real. That complicates things." "How?" "Because if he is acting in good faith, the River Moot might still uphold the contract. Intent matters. If he genuinely believed he had a legal claim, the Moot might rule in his favor and just punish your uncle." Kendra felt the hope drain out of her. "So this does not help." "It helps," Jakob said. "But we need more. We need to prove that the contract was made against your will, that you had no knowledge of it, and that you have been actively refusing it for 3 years. Martin Wells can testify to the first part. Your uncle can testify to the second. And you can testify to the third. And then what? Then we call the River Moot and let them decide." Kendra looked at her uncle, at the broken man who had sold her future for a handful of coins. She felt no pity for him, only a cold, distant anger. "Why did you come back?" she asked. "Because your ferryman made me an offer," Fenimore said. "He said if I testified against Drayton, he would not turn me over to the magistrate for fraud and blackmail. He said I could disappear after the moot, go somewhere far away and start over. It is more than I deserve." "It is," Kendra agreed. Jakob touched her shoulder, gentle. "We need to move fast. Drayton gave you until sunset to decide, which means he is planning something. We call the moot tonight." "How?" "I already sent word. Every ferryman, boat builder, and river trader within a day's travel will be here by dark. The moot will convene at moonrise." Kendra looked at him, at the quiet determination in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, this near stranger, had gone to war for her. He had tracked down her uncle, negotiated a confession, gathered witnesses, and called a moot, all in 5 days. He had done what she could not have done alone, and he had done it without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. "Thank you," she said. Jakob's expression softened. "Do not thank me yet. We still have to win." The River Moot convened on the landing as the moon rose, a silver coin in the black sky. Lanterns hung from poles driven into the mud, casting flickering light over the gathered crowd. There were perhaps 40 people, men and women, human and orc and a few dwarves, all of them river folk. They stood in a loose circle, talking in low voices, their faces serious. At the center of the circle stood Jakob, Kendra, and Fenimore on one side and Drayton on the other. Drayton had brought a lawyer, a thin man in expensive robes who looked deeply uncomfortable with the informal setting. Between them stood the moot caller, an old woman named Brenna Thorne who had been running the river trade for 50 years. She had a face like weathered oak and eyes that missed nothing. "We are here to settle a dispute," Brenna said, her voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Drayton Morwick claims a marriage contract with Kendra Pritchett, made 3 years ago and paid for in full. Kendra Pritchett disputes the contract, claiming it was made without her knowledge or consent. Both parties have agreed to abide by the decision of this moot. Are there any objections?" No one spoke. "Then we will hear the case. Drayton Morwick, present your claim." Drayton stepped forward, his lawyer beside him. 3 years ago, I entered into a marriage contract with Kendra Pritchett, negotiated through her legal guardian, Fenimore Pritchett. The contract was witnessed, signed, and paid for according to the law. I paid 200 silver marks in bride price, a substantial sum, in good faith. Kendra fled before the marriage could take place, and I have spent the last 3 years searching for her. I am here to claim what is legally mine. The lawyer handed the contract to Brenna, who read it carefully, her lips moving slightly. Then she looked at Kendra. "Kendra Pritchett, what is your answer?" Kendra stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, so she clasped them together to hide it. "I never agreed to this contract," she said. "I was 15 years old when it was made, and I was not present when it was signed. My uncle forged my signature and took the bride price without my knowledge. I only found out about the contract a week before Drayton came to collect me, and I refused then as I refuse now. I do not want to marry him. I never did." Brenna looked at Fenimore. "Fenimore Pritchett, you were Kendra's guardian at the time the contract was made. What do you have to say?" Fenimore stepped forward, his head bowed. "Everything Kendra said is true. I forged her signature. I took the bride price and spent it on my own debts. She had no knowledge of the contract until Drayton came to claim her. I lied to Drayton, and I lied to my niece. I am guilty of fraud, and I accept whatever punishment this moot sees fit." A murmur ran through the crowd. Drayton's face went pale, then red. "That is a lie," he said. "He is saying that to protect her." "It is not a lie," Jakob said. He stepped forward and handed Brenna a second document. "This is the original contract which Fenimore kept. Look at the date. It has been backdated by more than a year. Look at the signature. It is too neat, too careful to be Kendra's handwriting. And look at the witness signatures. Martin Wells, a clerk who worked for Fenimore at the time, will testify that he refused to witness the contract because Kendra was not present. Fenimore found someone else to forge the witness signature as well." Brenna examined the document, then looked at Drayton. "Did you know about the forgery?" "No," Drayton said. "I had no idea. My father arranged the contract. He told me it was legitimate. I paid the bride price in good faith." "But you knew Kendra did not want to marry you," Jakob said. "I thought she was nervous. Young brides often are. She ran away. That is not nervousness. That is refusal." Drayton's jaw tightened. "She ran because she was confused because her uncle did not prepare her properly. I came to bring her home to fulfill the contract we both agreed to." "She never agreed," Jakob said, his voice hard. "And you know it. You have been chasing her for 3 years, not because you love her, but because you think you own her, because you paid money and you want what you bought." "That is not true." "Then why did you offer her a business partnership this afternoon? Why did you tell her she could come back as your partner instead of your wife if all you care about is the contract?" Drayton went still. The crowd murmured again, louder this time. "What is this?" Brenna asked. Kendra spoke up. "He came to me today and offered me a partnership. He said I could work for him, build boats for him, and we could forget about the marriage. But he also said if I refused, he would go to the magistrate and have me taken by force. He was using the contract to manipulate me." Drayton's lawyer stepped forward. "That is hearsay. There is no proof I heard it," said a voice from the crowd. A young man stepped forward, a fisherman by the look of him. "I was checking my nets upstream and I heard the whole conversation. He threatened her, told her if she did not come willingly he would have her taken in chains." Another voice spoke up. "I saw him ride in this afternoon. He was alone, no guards. He was not here to enforce a contract. He was here to make a deal." Drayton's face twisted with anger. "This is absurd. You are all taking the word of an orc over a human, a fugitive over a lawful claimant. Enough," Brenna said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "I have heard enough." She looked at the crowd. "The moot will deliberate." The rivermen and women drew together, talking in low voices. Kendra stood beside Jakob, her heart pounding. She could not hear what they were saying, but she could see their faces, the way they looked at Drayton, at Fenimore, at her. Some looked sympathetic, some looked skeptical. She could not tell which way it would go. After what felt like an eternity, Brenna stepped forward. "The moot has reached a decision," she said. "The contract between Drayton Morwick and Kendra Pritchett is declared void. It was made through fraud, without Kendra's knowledge or consent, and with a forged signature. Drayton Morwick acted in good faith, but good faith does not make a fraudulent contract valid. The bride price will be returned to him in full, to be paid by this community as restitution. Fenimore Pritchett is guilty of fraud and blackmail and is hereby exiled from the river trade. He is forbidden from working on or near the river for the rest of his life. If he is found in violation of this order, he will be turned over to the magistrate for prosecution." Fenimore nodded, his face ashen. He turned and walked away without a word, disappearing into the darkness beyond the lanterns. Brenna looked at Drayton. "You are owed justice, Mr. Morwick, but not in the form of a wife. The bride price will be returned to you within the month. As for your behavior today, threatening Kendra Pritchett and attempting to coerce her into a business arrangement under duress, you are warned. If you attempt to contact her again, for any reason, you will be declared outlaw on this river. Do you understand?" Drayton's hands were shaking with rage, but he nodded. "I understand. Then this moot is concluded." The crowd began to disperse, talking among themselves, heading back to their boats and their homes. Drayton stood alone for a moment, staring at Kendra, his face unreadable. Then he turned and walked to his horse, mounted, and rode away without looking back. Kendra felt her knees go weak. Jakob caught her, his arm around her shoulders, holding her steady. "It is over," he said. "It is over," she repeated, and then she started to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the overwhelming weight of 3 years lifting all at once. Jakob held her while she cried, his presence solid and warm, and when she finally pulled away, he handed her a handkerchief without a word. "Thank you," she said, wiping her eyes, "for everything." "You do not need to thank me." "I do. You saved me. You stood between us and said no, and you made it stick. I do not know how to repay that." Jakob looked at her, his pale eyes serious. "You do not repay it. You just keep living. You finish the barge, you build more boats, you do the work you love. That is enough." Kendra nodded, but there was something else she wanted to say, something she had been holding back for months. She opened her mouth, then closed it, afraid. Jakob seemed to sense it. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then forced herself to continue. "I do not want to be just your business partner anymore." Jakob went very still. "What do you want to be?" "I do not know. Something more, if you want that too." For a long moment, Jakob said nothing. Then, very slowly, he smiled. It was the first real smile she had ever seen from him, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter. "I want that too," he said. Kendra felt her heart lift. "You do? I have wanted it for months. I just did not know how to say it. You could have said it like that." "I am not good with words. You are better than you think." Jakob laughed, a soft, surprised sound. "Maybe." He reached out and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "We will figure it out together." "Together," Kendra agreed. They stood there on the landing, the lanterns flickering around them, the river flowing dark and steady at their feet. Above them, the stars were coming out, bright pinpricks in the velvet sky. It felt like the beginning of something, fragile and new and full of possibility. The next 3 weeks were a blur of work and quiet, growing affection. Kendra and Jakob finished the barge, working side by side in a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. They did not talk much about what had happened at the moot, or about Drayton, or about the future. They just worked, and in the evenings they sat by the fire and drank coffee and let the silence speak for them. But there were small changes. Jakob started leaving her coffee in the morning, a cup beside her tools, still warm when she woke. Kendra started cooking meals for both of them. Simple things like stew and bread, and they ate together instead of separately. And sometimes when they passed each other in the workshop, their hands would brush, or their shoulders would touch, and they would both pause just for a moment before moving on. The barge was launched on a bright morning in early summer. Half the village turned out to watch, along with a dozen rivermen who had come to see Jakob and Kendra's work. The barge slid into the water smooth and easy, her hull gleaming with fresh paint, her deck solid and true. Kendra had carved a name into the bow at Jakob's suggestion: Resolve. "It suits her," Jakob said, standing beside Kendra on the landing as the barge bobbed in the current. "And it suits you. You think so, I know so." The barge was bought by a merchant from upriver. A fair price that left them with enough to start on the next project and pay back the rivermen who had pooled their coin to cover Drayton's bride price. Brenna Thorne had overseen the collection and the repayment, and she came to the boatyard a week after the launch to deliver the news that the debt was settled. "Drayton took the money and left," Brenna said. "He has not been seen on the river since. I think he finally accepted that he lost." "Good," Kendra said. Brenna looked at her, then at Jakob, and smiled. "You two make a good team, do not waste it." "We do not plan to," Jakob said after Brenna left. Kendra turned to Jakob. "I have been thinking," she said. "About what?" "About what you said at the moot. About how I should just keep living, keep doing the work I love. I want to do that. But I also want to do it with you, not just as partners in the business, but as partners in everything." Jakob's expression softened. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Kendra felt her cheeks flush. "I suppose I am." "If you want that." "I want that," Jakob said. "But I want to do it right. I want to ask you properly." "You do not have to, I want to." He took her hand and led her down to the landing, where the water lapped at the pilings and the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold. He knelt on the planks, still holding her hand, and looked up at her. "Kendra Pritchett," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I am not good with words and I am not a rich man, but I can promise you this. I will stand between you and anything that tries to hurt you. I will work beside you for as long as you will have me. I will give you my whole heart, such as it is, and I will never ask you to be anything other than who you are. Will you marry me?" Kendra's throat was tight, her eyes stinging with tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Jakob stood and pulled her into his arms, and she held him tight, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. When he kissed her, it was gentle and tentative, a question more than a demand. She answered by kissing him back, her hands in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "When?" Jakob asked. "Whenever you want." "Next week," Kendra laughed. "That is fast. I have waited long enough. So have I." They were married a week later, in a small ceremony on the landing with Brenna Thorne presiding and the rivermen as witnesses. Kendra wore a simple dress she had borrowed from a woman in the village, and Jakob wore his best shirt and trousers, cleaned and mended for the occasion. They exchanged vows in front of the people who had fought for them, who had stood with them at the moot, and when Brenna pronounced them married, the crowd cheered. There was a feast afterward, laid out on tables along the riverbank, simple food but plentiful. Kendra and Jakob sat together, her hand in his, and watched the sun set over the water. It felt surreal, impossible, this happiness. But it was real, and it was hers, and she had fought for it. "You think Drayton will ever come back?" Kendra asked. "No," Jakob said. "I think he knows it is over. He is a proud man, but he is not a fool, and my uncle, gone. Brenna heard he went south, far from the river. I do not think we will see him again." Kendra nodded. It was strange to think of them both gone, the two men who had controlled her life for so long, but she did not feel sorry. She felt free. The first year of their marriage was hard work and quiet joy. They built 2 more barges and a fishing boat, and Kendra's reputation as a master carpenter began to spread. People came from upriver and down, asking for her work, and Jakob handled the negotiations and the logistics while Kendra focused on the craft. They were a good team, better than either of them had expected. They did not talk much about children, not at first. They were both focused on the business, on building something that would last. But one evening, as they sat by the fire, Kendra said, "I think I am pregnant." Jakob looked at her, his eyes wide. "You think?" "I am fairly certain." "How long?" "A few weeks, maybe. I am not sure." Jakob set down his coffee and moved to sit beside her, his hand on her knee. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," Kendra admitted, "but happy, I think." "I am scared too," Jakob said, "but I think we can do this, together." "Together," Kendra agreed. Their daughter was born in the spring, a small, squalling thing with green skin and Jakob's pale eyes. They named her Vera, and she was the loudest, most demanding creature Kendra had ever met. But she was also perfect, and when Kendra held her for the first time, she felt a rush of love so fierce it nearly brought her to her knees. Jakob was a surprisingly good father. He built a cradle for Vera, carved with intricate patterns, and he sang to her in a low, rumbling voice that always put her to sleep. He changed her diapers without complaint and walked the floor with her when she cried in the night. Kendra watched him and felt her heart swell. They had 2 more children over the next few years, a boy named Bryce and another boy named Tobias. The boatyard grew, and they hired a few workers to help with the larger projects. Kendra taught them the craft, patient and exacting, and Jakob handled the business side, keeping the books and managing the clients. It was a good life. Not easy, but good. There were hard days when the work was too much and the children were too loud and Kendra felt like she might break under the weight of it all. But there were also days when she stood at the landing, watching the sun rise over the river, and felt a deep, abiding contentment. One evening, when Vera was 5 and Bryce was 3 and Tobias was just a baby, Kendra and Jakob sat on the landing after the children were asleep. The stars were out, bright and clear, and the river was a ribbon of silver in the moonlight. "You ever think about what might have happened?" Kendra asked. "If Drayton had taken me back?" "No," Jakob said. "I do not see the point in thinking about things that did not happen. But if he had, he did not. You are here with me, and that is all that matters." Kendra leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am glad you stepped between us." "So am I." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the river, to the night birds calling in the trees. Then Jakob said, "I love you, Kendra Pritchett Jensen." It was the first time he had said it out loud, though she had known it for years. Kendra felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you too, Jakob Jensen." They sat together as the moon climbed higher, the river flowing steadily at their feet, carrying them forward into the future. It was not the life Kendra had imagined when she was 15, standing in her father's workshop and dreaming of the boats she would build. But it was better, richer, more real than any dream, and it was hers, built with her own hands, her own heart, and the man who had stood between her and the world and said simply no. Years passed, measured in launches and harvests, in children growing and boats sold. Vera grew tall and serious, with a gift for numbers that Jakob recognized and nurtured. Bryce was all energy and laughter, always running, always climbing, always getting into trouble. Tobias was the quiet one, thoughtful and watchful, his green eyes missing nothing. When Vera turned 10, Kendra taught her how to plane a board, how to read the grain, how to let the wood tell her what it wanted to be. Vera took to it immediately, her hands steady and sure. Jakob watched them work together and smiled. "She has your gift," he said. "She has her own gift," Kendra corrected, "but I am glad to share mine with her." The boatyard thrived. They built barges and fishing boats, and once a small pleasure yacht for a wealthy merchant from the capital. Kendra's name became known throughout the river trade, and people spoke of her work with respect. She was no longer the runaway orc girl hiding from her past. She was Kendra Jensen, master carpenter, wife, mother. Sometimes, late at night, Kendra would think about Drayton. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, whether he ever thought about her. But those thoughts came less and less as the years went by, until finally they stopped altogether. He was part of her past, a chapter that had closed, and she had no interest in reopening it. One autumn afternoon, when the leaves were turning gold and the air was crisp with the promise of winter, a stranger came to the boatyard. He was a young man, maybe 20, with dark hair and nervous eyes. He asked to speak with Kendra, and when she came out of the workshop, he introduced himself as Martin Wells' nephew. "My uncle passed away last month," the young man said. "He left something for you." He handed her a small wooden box, polished and smooth. Kendra opened it and found a letter inside, written in Martin's careful hand. "Dear Kendra," it read, "I heard about your wedding and I am glad. You deserve happiness, and I am grateful I could play a small part in helping you find it. I wanted you to know that standing up for you at the moot was one of the best things I ever did. It reminded me that doing the right thing, even when it is hard, is always worth it. I hope your life is full of joy, and I hope you never stop building beautiful things. With respect and admiration, Martin Wells." Kendra read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the box. "Thank you," she said to the young man. "Your uncle was a good man. He spoke of you often," the young man said. "He was proud of what you accomplished." After he left, Kendra showed the letter to Jakob. He read it in silence, then handed it back. "He was right," Jakob said. "You do build beautiful things." "So do you," Kendra said. "I build functional things, you build art. Art that floats and carries cargo, that is functional too." Jakob smiled. "Fair enough." That night, after the children were asleep, Kendra and Jakob walked down to the landing and stood looking at the river. The moon was full, casting long shadows, and the water gleamed like hammered silver. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if we had never met?" Kendra asked. "No," Jakob said, "because I cannot imagine a life without you in it. Even though I brought trouble to your door, you brought more than trouble. You brought skill and laughter and a reason to get up in the morning. You brought a family. You brought a future." Kendra felt her throat tighten. You gave me those things too. You gave me a home when I had none. You gave me a chance when no one else would. You stood between me and the man who wanted to take my freedom, and you said no. You saved me, Jakob. We saved each other, Jakob said. He took her hand, and they stood together in the moonlight, the river flowing past them, steady and eternal. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and somewhere in the forest an owl called, low and mournful. I would do it all again, Jakob said quietly. Every hard day, every fight, every moment of doubt, I would do it all again to end up here with you. So would I, Kendra said. They stayed on the landing until the moon set and the stars began to fade, reluctant to let go of the moment. But eventually the cold drove them back to the house, to the fire and the warmth and the quiet breathing of their children asleep upstairs. Kendra lay beside Jakob in the darkness, his arm around her, his heartbeat steady against her back. She thought about the girl she had been, scared and alone, running from a future she had not chosen. She thought about the man who had stood between her and that future and refused to let it take her. And she thought about the life they had built together, piece by piece, day by day, a life of work and love and stubborn, beautiful hope. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Jakob murmured, half asleep. "For saying no." Jakob's arm tightened around her. "Always," he said. And in the warmth and safety of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Kendra closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The past was gone, the future was bright, and the present was more than she had ever dared to dream. The boatyard would be there in the morning, and the river would still flow, and the work would still be waiting. But for now, she had everything she needed. She had her family, her craft, and the man who had stood between her and the darkness and made room for the light. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.